What's going on, everybody? Good late morning or early afternoon. And it's time to talk about something that I don't know if it really needs to be talked about because it's so obvious, but the fact that it is so obvious makes me feel like I need to talk about it. So we're just going to go with it. We got to talk about the Seahawks on offense. Specifically, we need to talk about the play calling. So I'm sure you guys have noticed, but the Seahawks are throwing the ball a lot, and they're not running the ball very much. In fact, you could have watched that game on Sunday against the Giants and come away with the assumption that the Seahawks offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, thinks that it's illegal to run the ball. So this is apparent to anybody who's watched the first 5 games, but the numbers also verify what we're seeing with our eyes. Greg Bell has this tweet here. No NFL team has thrown it more than the Seahawks this season, 199 times in 5 games. And no team has run it fewer times than the Seahawks, 105 rushes through 5 weeks. And I'm guessing some of those rushes are Geno Smith scrambles. So it's probably even a little bit worse than it looks because those scrambles, remember, are meant to be passes. So, quite simply, the Seahawks are out of balance. And ordinarily, you would look at something like this and you would assume, oh, they're always playing from behind. They're always trying to catch up. They're always down by 2 or 3 scores and they're trying to get back in the game. But if you've been watching the games, you would know that that's not true either. And just in case there's any doubt about it, you got this chart here from Hayden Winks that ranks neutral pass rate for each team in the league over the last 4 weeks. So it excludes week 1, which is kind of unfortunate because week 1 was the one week where we ran the ball a lot in the second half. But regardless, I mean, look at this. Our neutral pass rate, and by the way, neutral pass rate, what that means is what is the team doing in situations where it is viable to do either running or passing? Because I think we all understand there are situations where you pretty much have to pass, and there are situations where you are almost certainly going to run. So it's trying to throw those out of the sample and just say, what are teams doing in situations where you could reasonably do one or the other? The Seahawks are not only in first place here, 0.71, they are destroying everybody else. 0.71, which is 71% of the time. The next closest team is the Bengals at 59. That's a massive discrepancy. And you can see how every other team is kind of in a logical progression here. Like, some are pushing up close to 60, but none of them get there. Some teams down at 50. Some teams are getting down to a little below 40. The one team that's an outlier down below would be the Packers, which makes sense because they had Malik Willis for a couple games. But the Seahawks being this high, whether or not you compensate for situational football, whether or not you compensate for, oh, they're way ahead or they're way behind, or it's the last 2 minutes of the half or the game's over, whatever, no matter how you chop this up, they are passing the ball at a record rate, and they are running the ball at a, whatever the opposite of a record is, rate. They're running the ball, they're not running the ball, basically. And I don't think I need to tell you guys, if you've been watching me for a while, you know, I love throwing the ball. I love a pass-first offense. I think that's how you win in the modern NFL. I might not say that in a couple years with the way trends are going, admittedly. I think the league might be swinging back towards a run-first model. We'll see if it gets there. But for the moment, I think teams win games, and games are won through the passing attack. But this team, what business do they have being on this side of the equation? Again, whether you use the raw data or you use the advanced metric of like neutral pass rate, what business do we have being on that side of the scale? All the way to that side of the scale. All right. Let's think about some of the other teams that aren't running the ball. Like the Seahawks have run the ball 105 times this year. Let's look at some other teams that have run the ball about that many times, a little bit more, or the same number in one case, actually. But let's look at some of the other teams that aren't running the ball very much. Dallas Cowboys. They're not running the ball very much so far this year. I think they're like 25th in attempts, 31st in yards. Well, guess what? Who are their running backs, right? Rico Dowdle, who's been on the roster for years now, is like a reserve, mediocre at best, washed up Zeke Elliott, probably weighs like 300 pounds, and he's just sucking in his gut every time he goes on the field. They got Deuce Vaughn, who is probably weighs like 50 pounds, so I guess they're occupying both sides of that spectrum. They don't have running backs. You see what I'm saying here? Like, Rico Dowdle is their lead running back, and Rico's been hanging around. He's been dangling around on that roster for years, never really doing anything. They have him out there because they don't have anybody better. This is a team that needs to be not running the ball very much because they don't have running back talent, right? The Cincinnati Bengals. Well, number one, they're not running the ball that much because their defense is terrible, and they're always playing from behind. They're 1-4 right now, so they lose a lot. But again, I'm looking at their running back talent. Like Zach Moss, he's all right, you know. I like Chase Brown, but he's still relatively new on the block. I'm not yet convinced that he is a lead back in this league. I'm not yet convinced that he is a bell cow running back. And that's actually all they have, other than BruÄ running the ball a few times, right? So they're very thin at running back. Only 2 running backs have gotten any action at all so far this year. And their quote-unquote lead back in terms of attempts is kind of jaggy, right? He's a guy who's bounced around the league for a little while here. He's just a guy. Vegas Raiders. All right, here's another team that doesn't run the ball very much. Partially because they're not a very good team. They've been losing, right? They play from behind a good amount. But bigger than that, what's their running back talent? Zamir White, who I don't even think Zamir White started in college, and now he's starting in the NFL. So far, not been successful. Alexander Madison, decent backup, good backup running back, I'd say even. But nothing that you're really excited about. Amir Abdullah, who I think has torn his Achilles like 8 times in his life somehow. And I know that's probably medically impossible, but he's somehow managed it. He's been around forever. He's on the last leg of his career. So those are your running backs. Yeah, I'm not going to run the ball very much either. Because you're not going to be successful. You ain't got the horses. So, yeah, makes sense. What about the one team that has run the ball as few times as the Seahawks? The Titans. The Titans are the one team in the league that has matched the Seahawks in rushing attempts so far this year with 105. They are right near the bottom with the Seahawks, and they played their bye week. They haven't played their bye week. You don't play your bye week. They've had their bye week. Okay? That's why. And also, by the way, if you look at their running backs, let's be real here. Tony Pollard is kind of a scat back. Tyjae Spears is, he's okay, but nothing too intriguing or interesting there. And, yeah, what else are we doing here? What are we doing? So, it makes sense that these teams don't run the ball very much, right? Like they either don't have the players, they've only played 4 games, or both. The Seahawks have probably run the ball fewer times than the Titans on intended run plays because, again, of the Geno Smith scrambles, which I'm guessing outweigh the Will Levis and Mason Rudolph scrambles. I don't know that for sure. Don't throw me in jail if I got that wrong. But the point I'm trying to make here is this Seahawks team has mostly been involved in close games. The one time they weren't in a close game was the Dolphins game, where they were on the positive side of that. So if anything, they should have run the ball more in that game because they were ahead the whole time, if anything. And I guess you could say maybe the Lions game got a little out of hand. Okay, I can dig it, but that's 1 game out of 5. Against the Giants, game was never out of reach until you got to the 4th quarter. And even then, it wasn't technically out of reach. It felt like it. But you were never down or up more than 1 score for 50 minutes or so in that game. So it has nothing to do with just game situation, as this chart shows you. They're choosing to be extremely pass happy. And if we had the Cowboys running backs, or the Bengals running backs, or the Raiders running backs, even the Titans running backs, and by the way, I know they're actually running the ball a pretty decent amount because of the bye week, but I thought I'd just throw them in here as kind of a joke to illustrate how imbalanced we are. This team has spent 2 second-round picks on running backs in the last few years. And we have, I think, I'm going to say it, I don't know if he is, I feel like he is. If anybody feels otherwise, you're free to. One of those guys is a top 5 running back in the NFL right now. Ken Walker, to me, you cannot name 5 running backs in the NFL better than him. So, you've got a top 5 running back. I don't know how good Charbonnet is compared to every other backup running back in the league, but he's probably up there. He's good. He can play. Why is this team not running the ball? Especially when you have a offensive line that can't really pass protect, so your quarterback's getting killed, and you're imbalanced, so it's even harder to protect him because other teams know you're going to throw the ball a lot. It doesn't make sense on any level. So, I don't think I said anything shocking in this video. Again, if you've been watching the team, you know what they're doing. But, Ryan Grubb, you gotta pull it back. You have gone too far when you have lost me. Believe me, I would like this if it was in moderation. But this is not moderation. This has gotten out of hand, and it needs to stop immediately. All right, see you guys later. Go Hawks, let me know what you think. And I know it's obvious, but it had to be said, so I did a video on it, and hopefully I never have to do a video about it again because things get better going forward.